I actually was thinking, I'm like, I want to do like today's class, like for Shlema for my father, Yisrael Tzvi Ben Rachel. He's having surgery today. Amir Tashem, if everything goes well. Yeah, so just to have in mind. That all this learning, I'm always like, oh, he would love this learning. Like, he would be like so proud. It's funny. Like now, he's like losing his ability to speak, but like one of the things was like, I asked him like a few weeks ago, I'm like, Todd, did you ever learn Tanya? And he was like, oh, no. I'm like, well, now, guess what? Your daughter's learning it. So we're here. Okay, so welcome everybody. And welcome home. This is so exciting. I feel like if we're like cutting class or like sneaking out to do a share, then like this is really something that you want. Could be. Okay, so welcome back. So we'll start like a recap, because really what we're going to try to do today is chapter, I always like want to bite off more than we can chew, but if we could get through 15, maybe 16 and 17, but definitely like review up until 15 and then do 15 and then 16 and possibly 17. So we'll start all the way back from the beginning with chapter 1. So we started with chapter 1. This is for you, Mom, you don't worry. It's also for me. It's like, it's fine. I need this. And then anybody who's coming in late, it's also good for anyone. We need to reprocess this, and then you'll be able to be like, oh, that's chapter 3, that's chapter 7. Like you'll be able to hear. So chapter 1, we spoke about is that we said that you should be a tzaddik and not a rasha, and then we explained the concept that there's this middle person in between, the in-betweener, which was referred to as the Benoni. And then we spoke about the fact that you have 2 neshamas, and they are, and this is the test, this is where you get to see how much you remember. We have an animalistic soul, which we're given first, and then we also have a locus, right? A godly soul. So we have the animalistic soul, that's first, that's part of our body, that's our ego, that's wanting to like fill its needs all the time. And then we also have this godly soul, which we get on later in life, which is a special, literally like a piece of Hashem, and all it wants to do is go back to Hashem. So we have one that only wants to stay in this world and one that only wants to go back up. So that's kind of like a battle. So you have these like twins inside of you. So then we went into chapter 2 and we spoke a little bit more about what a neshama means, because a neshama is not necessarily something tangible, not something that we can recognize and realize and feel. So we have a neshama. What is a neshama? Neshama is basically Hashem unraveling himself, all his midos, all his soul powers, which were seen as spheros, are given to us as kochos. So we have soul powers, and they are 3...
Thought, speech, action.
No, even before that, before the thought, speech, and action, the makeup, no, that's the next chapter, don't worry, that's Levushim. What's the 3 intellectual? Chachma, Bina, and Das, right? So those are seen as the mother and the father, right? Chachma, Bina, with the fusion of Das, then creates the 7 emotional. So then we have, which is, by the way, yes, the top 3 are Chabad, and then the 7 emotional. I feel like you matched the decor. I know. By the way, you like find that one dress, then you just wear it, and then also like when you put it on after your baby, you're like, this is what I used to wear, right?
No,
it doesn't come out again. So you have the 3 intellectual, the 7 emotional. These give birth where the animal soul is ruling, and in really what Tanya wants to see is that the 3 intellectual give birth to the 7 emotional. Because in the opposite, in the animal soul, the emotions run the house. So it's the 7 lower emotionals that affect the 3 higher intellectual and try to wiggle their way around this world just on emotions. But we explained that can be somewhat chaotic. So we try to keep the intellect ruling over the emotions, and that was the chapter about the Nefesh Elokis. Then we took a little bit of a break and we spoke about what the animal soul is, and that the animal soul has the same soul powers, but it's just in the reverse. Okay, so it's the opposite. One, this comes from here and it affects down here, and then the opposite of this affects the up. Okay, so that's the animal soul, and then the godly soul. Then we spoke about that your soul is here in this world, but how does it interact? How Hashem says, okay, here's your soul, but I want you to interact in this world. You need thought, speech, and action. You need garments, you need clothing. And those levushim, those are the kind of like your behaviors. That's how, and all of those, thought, speech, and action, are all affected by, are all ways of using and tapping into your kohos. And then not only is that enough, but you also have food, which is Torah, right? Which is, we can equate the thought, speech, and action to mitzvos, and then Torah is even more so because food becomes part of you. So these are kind of like the building blocks for Tanya. So we have to have this information. Then also we explain a little bit further that everything that's in the animal soul is considered unholiness, but we gave another word for it, not bad, not ra. Sitra Achra, right? So it's the other side. So anything that's not connecting that to Hashem is considered other sidely or Ra or bad. But if you're able to see it clearly, then you've already removed the. I feel like this is like fill in the blank, you know, like the klipos, right? It's like, you know, like on the test they give like like the fill in the blanks on the bottom, and then like the teachers would give like extra words on the word bank. Like it's not fair. You thinking of what? Manlibs. Oh right, an adjective, right? Okay, so now we have klipos and we have to remove them. Some things are thicker, some things we don't even touch, right? Like not kosher or certain relationships. Hashem says, no, don't peel that. That's a coconut. It's impossible to get to. You don't need to get to it. It's okay. I'll tell you where you need to go and where you don't need to go. And then we explain that whole concept of holiness is kedusha, and then unholiness is when it's tethered to the other side. Then when that was, let's say 1 through 8. So that's terminology. That's vocabulary words, okay? Then starting with chapter 9, we tried to explain it in a little bit of a bigger level where we gave that mashal, that metaphor of the small city where there's 2 kings and one of them is old and the other one is young, and one of them, they both want full control of the city at the same time, and that was kind of like your nefesh elokis and your nefesh bahamas and who's going to get to the car first. That was that mashal. Then we went on to chapter 10, which was 2 types of tzaddikim. So we said are we going too fast? No. So there's 2 types of tzaddikim. So there's tzaddik v'ralo and tzaddik v'tovlo. That one tzaddik that totally is on such a high level that what did he do? He took his Yetzer Hara and he flipped it, right? So he gave himself 2 Yetzer Tovs. So now he's totally obliterated, got rid of whatever animalistic soul that he had, and he made his animalistic soul another godly soul. So that's Tzaddik Gomer, that's Tzaddik V'Tovlo. And then there's Tzaddik V'Ralo, where he's a Tzaddik, but what was the difference between Tzaddik V'Tovlo and Tzaddik V'Ralo? One of them was totally converted it and flipped it to a Yetzer Tov, and then the other one was, he has it, but it's kind of like laying dormant. Like it's kind of there, but it's like to the miniest, like to the lowest level, where he's able to totally serve Hashem with his insides and his outsides. When we say insides, what are we referring to? Your insides are your neshama, but more than that, it's what we're going to talk about a little bit more today because it has to do with the Beinonis, your emotions. So we explained that there's 2 types of tzaddikim, and then one of them is able to flip it, one of them has it very, very low. Then we explained in the next chapter 11 that there's 2 types of Rashaya, right? There's a Rasha Viralo and Rasha B'Tovlo. So we have a Rasha who's so bad that what happens to his Yetzer Hara? His Yetzer Tov? It like disassociates, it leaves him. That's like a totally evil person that doesn't have any regret whenever he does anything wrong, like a sociopath. And then we have Tzaddik, then we have Rasha B'Tovlo, where maybe sometimes we think that that's us because that's somebody who messes up, right? That's somebody who can't always control.
Didn't you say that you should be thinking with your knowledge and then let your knowledge lead your emotions, not your emotions leading your knowledge? So how is it that your neshama, like that's your emotional component of your neshama, that's the tzaddik? Like shouldn't you be going with the knowledge before the emotion?
With who?
With your, with doing, you had said that knowledge, you should lead with knowledge, not your emotions, right? So you just said before that neshama is coming from the emotions.
Neshama is coming from the emotions? Did I mean, I meant like your animal soul maybe is coming from your emotions. Like your animal soul can be seen as your emotions. So if you could control your animal soul, then that's controlling your emotions. But that's not controlling your behavior.
Neshama is your godly soul. So
your neshama...
Emotions are not your soul.
Right. By the way, we'll take a minute to explain. Right. Maybe I wasn't saying it right. Maybe I was saying it fast.
You said you're emotional. What you just said before 2 seconds. Like,
oh my gosh, I think I remember. I said 2 seconds ago. 1 second. You're emotional. Okay. Tzaddik Viralo is Tzaddik Viralo is somebody who has a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Tov inside of him, but so much neglects his Yetzer Tov, his godly soul, and only feeds his animal soul that the godly soul has nowhere to go. He's like, okay, I'm checking out. But he doesn't totally leave him. He just is like an aura around him. But it's not, he doesn't want to be part of that anymore. Where a Rasha V'Tovlo, like the second level of a Rasha who doesn't have it so bad, is somebody who makes mistakes and feeds into his animal soul and his emotions and lets his emotions run his intellect, but feels bad. Every so often he'll say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I did that. Like, shoots, I spoke Lashon Hara, I should not have done that. And he feels regret, that's a Rasha V'Tovo.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you. I know. Tzaddik Viralo is like somebody who,
Why is it tzaddik?
so he's a tzaddik because, okay, so what's a tzaddik? Tzaddik is somebody who has perfect insides and perfect outsides. So that means that everything that he thinks about and wants to do and his entire will, his ratzon is aligned with Hashem's ratzon. So it's like, I want to daven because I know that that's what makes Hashem happy, then I am going to daven. Not because I'm going to daven because I need headspace this morning and I know that if I do that, then I'll be able to tackle the day. Because Hashem said so it's totally 100% aligned. The tzaddik, the Benoni, and that's what really we're going to discuss a little bit more today, the Benoni is somebody who has perfect control of his insides, and that doesn't mean that he has perfect insides. He has struggles and he has difficulties, but he's able to control them. A tzaddik doesn't have struggles or any difficulties. And by the way, that's not what
person like that.
What?
I think every human has struggles.
Right. So that's the thing. So we only are trying and striving to be Beinonim. We're not striving to be the tzaddik. The tzaddik is somebody who's able to conquer everything. We're saying Beinonim, and this is what we explained last week, was that a Beinoni has perfect outsides. His behavior is always perfect, but his emotions he's struggling through his emotions. But we said last week, and this is kind of where we ended off, is that they have Hashem on our side. The Beinoni always has Hashem as a guiding light. It's not, he has an extra person on his team. He doesn't have to worry. The Rasha doesn't. The Beinoni has been practicing putting his Nefesh HaBahamis to sleep so much that he has control over it. But he has to always be on guard. Does that make sense? Okay, fine. So that's really kind of where we left off last week. And then we also gave one tool. We gave like one tool. There's going to be lots of tools that we can work on. But the tool that we spoke about last week was, anybody remember? It was like Moa, I'm not sure who, like if we spoke about this last week. Oh my God, it feels like so long ago. Moa sha'alit ala halev, that your Moa, your intellect, rules over your emotions.
No, actually, that's
what?
That was what I end. That
was the question. Okay, so the first tool that we discussed last week, and we'll go into it a little bit more, is this ability to have your intellect rule over your emotions. Okay, so this was all catch up, and now we'll get started. Okay. We need like a recap. I even need a recap. I'm not like... Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm fixing this, yeah.
This tool is something that we have already, or this tool is something that we work
So
on?
that's a good question. So it's innate. It's something that we're all born with. We were explaining last week that you have the ability to control yourself when you're outside on the street and you won't yell at your kid. Second you close the door, you might do that. Maybe you'll do that, and maybe not. So therefore, that you have to tune into it. It means that if you, and we also gave that example from Chase Dow last week, that like, if I don't like tomatoes, but if somebody gave me $1 million, I would eat tomatoes every single day. If someone said, Faigy, if you eat a tomato every single day for 1 year, I'll give you $1 million. Even though I hate tomatoes, I'm going to do it because I have enough willpower to control my dissatisfaction for tomatoes and the mushiness. But I'll be able to do it because of this tool. So this is something, do you know what I'm talking about? No?
I love tomatoes.
You love tomatoes,
Yeah,
I know.
yeah.
Okay. I can't. It's like a sensory thing. It's like the little pits
And then
sliding
more,
everywhere.
and they're just so much worse.
Oh, I know. But like people who love it, like I don't. You're not a tomato person. It goes along. I always say it goes along with avocado. It goes along with like other things. But you'll be able to control it. So the first tool, which is innate, which you have, which we're born with, is this, and then you have to tap into and practice, is
It's
Mashal
hard. It's not easy to say like, oh, we have this tool and like go
Oh my
with
gosh.
it. It's like it's a
It's
real
a
like,
life's work.
It's life's work.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
It's so hard. I know. I'm like saying it like.
This tool, just like, no, this is not like a tool.
No,
that you
this-
just
that's
like,
what the whole-
click on. It's like
No. It's not something you just, it's not like an add-on. It's not like an add to cart and it's like
Right.
easy. It's
That's
so-
really great tool. It's like if when you feel yourself being like really frustrated about anything, and you're or at someone, or it's such a great way to remind yourself like I'm totally leading my next action or my next words
with
my
my,
emotions.
yeah.
And
It's
like,
such a
if
good
you
thing.
take yourself, it's like your ego out of it, and then which is tied to your emotions.
I think the biggest thing is, and this, by the way, like we didn't get to this yet, or maybe we did, the concept of bittul. We explained that like bittul is when the more you lower yourself and humble yourself, like you're saying, the more you have the ability to do it. And then also it's like any weight. It's like you practice it. You start with 5 pounds, 6 pounds, 7 pounds, 8 pounds. All of a sudden you're like, lifting these heavy weights because you have more and more willpower. So it's probably the hardest thing to do, but it's something that we do. Okay, so what we'll also try to do, by the way, we'll take a few minutes to explain a little bit what an emotion is and what a behavior is, because we're talking so much about emotions. So just before we get into chapter 15, let's just clearly define what emotion and what behavior is. So when you think emotion, what do you think of when you think emotion? Happy, sad, ladies. Like I always think like women, like, right? Like, well, we're more emotional. Like, what is it? Like what?
Feelings.
Feelings, right? It's your feelings. And then you have this concept of behavior. So what's behavior? Behavior is the way that you act, right? So behavior, by the way, like, it's funny, I was typing it out exactly. Hold on one second. I want to just get like the exact definition of like what really a behavior is. See if I can remember. Oh, so like a behavior is an activity with a duration, with a start and a stop. It's like, I am going to do this behavior, right? Think about it like kids with like bad behaviors, right? We want to get rid of their bad behaviors. What are their behaviors? Whining, kicking, whatever. At a certain point, it's going to stop, right? Make a tantrum for an hour, but that's a behavior that's going to stop. Come in. Come in.
Upstairs.
Oh, it's upstairs? Oh, okay, fine. I'm like, I did not put in my gourmet glad order yet today. It's fine. Okay, so behavior is an activity with a duration, a start and a stop, and it's something that you do and it's a way of expressing yourself. But if you were to figure out which one, and then an emotion, in contrast to behavior, is emotion is much closer to who you are. Like, do you associate yourself more with your emotions or with your behaviors? And which one is really more in tune to who you are? Your emotions, right? Your emotions are your inside. Emotion is much closer to me. A behavior, I can conquer a behavior. I can control my behavior, right, with this tool. But a behavior is almost can be seen as outside of you. It's like if you want to understand your insides and your outsides, your emotions are much closer to who you are. And if you want to really get to know me, you're going to find out the things that I like and the things that make me happy. Remember I said that story with like Bina, who like my daughter, who like figured out something that I wanted, and like she saw I was not happy, and so she made me pancakes and brought it, right, and made a huge mess in the kitchen making these pancakes. But she brought it, but she tapped into something. She tapped into my emotions. That's not a behavior. I don't make pancakes every single morning. I mean, I put in the the ones that you could stick in the microwave for 20 seconds, and that's my version, and like take it onto the bus and like. That's your breakfast. But an emotion is something so much deeper and much more connected to who you are. So if you are able with your behaviors to control your emotions, it's not an easy tool. Like I should not be saying it. I'm not throwing it out there like, oh, here's your hammer and go along your day. No, you have to keep working that hammer. So the more you are able to control your insides with the things that you do, the stronger you'll get. Okay? And that's why, by the way, when we say we're getting emotional, you don't say getting behavioral is very different than getting emotional. Emotional means that it's tapping into my to really what I like, who I am. It's to the closest place of who I am, where a behavior can be outside. So that's why it's much easier to control your behaviors than to control your emotions.
So is the emotion the neshama part and the behavior the guf part?
In this context, yes. I would say yes. Because if you're able to control your outsides, that's the things that you see, that's a little bit more external to you. That what we're saying is the more you control the outsides, the better you'll get on the insides. Yeah. So probably in this context, yes. But in contrast to behavior, the emotion is much closer to who you are. Okay? That makes sense? I think it's important to understand what your insides and what your outsides. A tzaddik has perfect insides and outsides. A rasha has both bad, and a Benoni has perfect outsides, perfect behavior, but turmoil inside, which he's trying to control.
Can you say that again?
The tzaddik is, so if you line them up, the perfect tzaddik has a tzaddik has perfect insides and outsides. A rasha has bad outsides, bad negative behavior, and negative emotions. Where a Benoni has on the outside, everything is perfect, but on the inside, he's struggling. That's where it's at. That's the whole book, is that those insides are struggling. So now how do I get to those emotions to perfect them? So we said the first way is to be moach shalat al halev, to make your outsides perfect, and that will have an effect on your insides. Now, just like there are two types of rasha and two types of tzaddik, there's also two types of Benonis. Okay? Like you thought you were going to get away with that one. So we have 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and now we have the Benoni, which is 3A and 3B. So now what are these two types of Benonis? So in Tanya, he explains it, and that there are there's one word, and by the way, this is like where Ivris like always comes in, like an eved, right? An eved is a slave, but if you read it like differently, with like if you change around the nakudos, it could be an oved. So what's the difference between an eved and an oved?
Oved is someone who's working.
Someone who's working, and an eved is a slave. Okay, so we have an eved, somebody who has the same job. An eved and an oved can have the same job, by the way. Somebody who's serving, right? Somebody who's serving, or somebody who is, or a servant, right? What's that like little teeny nuance? Will, right? One where he just sits back and he's like, I'm a servant, that's it. But then you could be a servant who is working, who is oved. If you think about that, like sometimes I try to think like, let's say with babysitters, right? You have like, or babysitters or cleaning ladies or whatever. Sorry that I'm like taking this out of context, but for a second, like you could have somebody that just works for you, shows up and that's it. I don't know, I learned this from my mother that like she's so good to the help. She's like always like feeding them, whatever. And also like my father has had aides in the house in and out, and like my mother's always like they sit at the table, Shabbos table. They have like gefilte fish with us, and they like as we're washing, they like wait for challah. I'm like, he doesn't need to wait for challah, but like he got so used to it, like he's part of the family. He's not just a servant; he's serving. And if you see it, you see the difference in like those babysitters or anybody who becomes part of the family, right? I've had this because I've had like many livings. They become part of the family. They're serving. They're not just sitting back and just being like, okay, at the end of the week, you pay me. I see you Monday. No, it's like, oh my gosh, like I'll see you Monday. Like you're taking care of my kids. You're cleaning my house, whatever it is. And you feel that like little relationship. I actually learned this from like Suri Weingart. I remember she one time said that Chloe's sister, she said like every morning when her babysitter shows up to the house, she gives her coffee and like she sits her in the kitchen and gives her like a little whatever, like just like you're taking care of my kids. Like so you can be an Evan, you could just sit back and be a servant, or you could be an Oved. So here's the difference between these two Beinonis. There is that Beinoni who, and by the way, we know many of them, and maybe some of them, you guys are sitting here, you're that Beinoni who doesn't have such strong drives to do bad. Like they could be the person who's like, the goody-goody. The kid in school, right, who's always on time and like always gets hundreds and like doesn't struggle. And then there's like the kid in the back that can't stop talking, gets kicked out all the time, doesn't get into seminary, whatever it is. Like, okay, we're talking high school, but like it's like I don't understand. Like I'm struggling so much. Why does she have it so easy? It doesn't make sense. Oh, she must be a tzaddik. No, she's actually the autopilot kids, right? That's what Chase Taub says. Those are the kids on autopilot. You send them to camp, turn up the notch, amazing summer, come home with all their clothing, all their socks, right? Everything is great. They never even opened up their, shampoo. So now you could have your shampoo, like that perfect kid. And then you have kids that go to camp that literally come home with one shoe and you're like, I don't understand. Like, and they're like, struggle is real. Like they really struggle. So you're like, how can it be that there's people who have it easy and then some people who are literally just struggling their whole life?
But maybe that's not their choice.
Maybe it's for sure not their choice. It comes down to this world with a certain set of inner turmoils. Some of them are just easier. Sometimes those are the nerds.
I feel like it's
Sometimes
ways.
it's
like,
ways.
Like the one who had like the perfect childhood is like struggling later. One who's like had like crazy childhood, like gets to whatever. And then obviously there's some people who feel like, oh my god, it's never getting easy for me, like ever.
So then that's probably the second type of Beinoni.
Right.
But there are people who coast. Think for 1 minute.
20%
right.
of each class.
Even the coasters,
20% of the class, yeah.
Even the coasters, you looking at them are
They
coasting.
look right. But they're not, right.
Inside
they're not. But
they-
that person. Like you go to shul and then there's like those kids that are just sitting and just like eating.
But the
and then there's the kids who are like their hands are eating
But
the
the
apple.
kid
Right.
who's all over the place, they don't care as much when. Sometimes it's difficult. I know because I literally have 2 children. Those are my 2 children.
You have 2 types of Beinoni.
I'm telling you, and one of them that when things are even a little not perfection, it's
harder for
that's her struggle.
Right.
And the kid who's all over the place comes home with one sock.
Almost like
she
less
doesn't care.
trouble.
She came home with one sock. Just
Right.
doesn't bother her. She's only upset when I'm upset about it. But
Right.
that's a me thing.
Right.
That's not a her
So
thing.
maybe it's that person. Okay, so like I'm imagining, I'm not going to say who, but like I'm imagining this like a family member of mine, like a cousin of mine that like, it's just like you look at their kids and you're like, yes, they go to school, this one's valedictorian, and maybe not. Maybe they have their own internal struggles, but from the outside, it looks like they're kind of on the Eved side. Kind of like they have it pretty much at peace. And obviously we know that not everybody has that peace, but it's almost like those kids were the goody-goodies, or the nerds, or the guy who goes on vacation and it's not hard for him to miss a minion. Like, it's like, no, of course we're only going to go to vacation where there's a minion. Like, because I'm on autopilot. It's not a derogatory.
Okay,
Not.
it's just their nature.
That's just their nature, and we'll talk about what they need to do. They still have to serve. It's not okay for them just to be on autopilot. We're going to explain that. And by the way, maybe it's even harder for them because it's on autopilot. But basically, what we're saying here is that Moach Shalat Aleid is that your intellect will always control your emotions. Let's say you have easy emotions. Let's say it's not hard for you.
So
You don't
why
get
is that
riled
not
up.
a
That's
tzaddik
one type of
v'tovlo?
Benoni.
Why is that not a tzaddik v'tovlo then?
So why? Because a tzaddik v'tovlo is like the ultimate. His like, it probably is. It's a person who has more tzaddik-like moments. Like we all said that we all could have tzaddik-like moments, right? We could all wake up in the day and we could do something totally for Hashem's will and dedicate that whole morning to Hashem. And that was a tzaddik-like moment. Then I'll fall into other stuff, but I had that moment. A Benoni, who's an Eved and who has it pretty much easy, is very much likely to have more tzaddik moments than the other Benoni. Yeah, similar. Definitely
In
like
a
in the
generation,
same.
there's only a handful.
Very few of them. There are very few of these people. These goodies are very
Or
rare.
just not passionate.
That is so deep because, one second,
Like-
I'll tell you why. Because what is that kind of person? That's a very intellectual person. That's a very much like I have easy, my behaviors and my emotions are pretty much in check, but I'm less passionate. I'm less emotional. Why?
Connected, less connected.
What, like, but why? Explain that. That's it.
I don't know. It's just,
Their behaviors and their emotions.
They don't have that much excitement because everything is pretty much even keel.
like, there's no like, oh my god.
Boring, right? That's what I'm saying. Like it's like Shay's Tab explains it. Like those are the maybe the
they like that
nerds.
lifestyle.
Maybe
They
they
do,
do,
but it's
they
not
do.
bad or good.
It's not bad or good. That's
Right.
that
I
person
think that's what I needed
who's
to
less
like
passionate.
remind myself. It's
not bad or
not
good.
just
Not
driving
bad or
bad
good.
No, no,
It's
we're
a
featured.
nature.
It's a nature.
It's a nature.
It's a nature, and you know that. And maybe out of all your kids, maybe you have one of them, or maybe
Might
of
be
all your
easier
friends.
to raise a child like that.
But-
doesn't mean it's necessarily easier for them. It's
Right.
just their nature.
It's just nature.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah, you
It's
have
not
that.
better.
You have that one kid who just things just come
They're
easier to them,
content.
and they're content.
Also not solid.
But what do we know about
Right.
contentness? Contentness is not a good thing. It's going in a little bit in the line of what Faigy was saying, that less passionate. You think Hashem just wants us to be on autopilot? Does Hashem want us to just be perfect inside, perfect outside? Everything is in line with my will at all times, and it's easygoing. No,
Why not?
because then why would he?
His goals.
The thing-
No,
That's
no,
passion.
Tzaddik is not
Tzaddik
false.
is
We
not
spoke about this
passion.
last week.
Being
Tzaddik is not
tzaddik
false
like
because
that,
Tzaddik, then we wouldn't. No, I didn't mean to call you out, but I'm saying we spent a lot of time on this, that Tzaddik is not, because we revere Tzaddikim, but Tzaddik
Again,
is
it's
not
called
handled.
Sefer Benoni.
Sefer Benoni.
It's not
We
called
want to
Sefer
be,
Tzaddik.
right. So now let's say we're saying that you are that Benoni who has things pretty easygoing. It's not hard for you. Let's say a guy. It's not hard for you to miss a minyan. Like, I mean, it's hard for you to miss a minyan. You won't miss minyan, right? You won't miss minyan because that's just what you're on. What do you mean? You wake up, you daven, I'm a From Jew, I daven 3 times a day. I'm a From Jew. What do you mean? It's not going to be hard for me. It's not going to be hard for me to talk Lashon Hara when I'm hanging out with my friends because it's not something that I'm maybe a little bit less passionate or maybe I'm in check. And then there's that Ovid who's constantly struggling, who every single morning and every single minute needs to be like, Faigy, don't blurt this out. Don't say this. Control your emotions. Pull yourself together. But those sometimes maybe are the wildest kids. Let's say instead of passionate, we'll say wild. Those are the kids that have a fire burning under them all the time, which makes it hard for them. It's like you could be on cruise control, or you could be constantly pushing the pedal, but right? Cruise control is a great thing. You just put it on, you set, you go, you're relaxed. But you don't have that thrill of like speeding up to 90 degrees. Oh my gosh, there's a cop coming. Let me go down to 65, right? You don't have that passionate feeling. So now, the question is, these are the two types of Beinonim, right? They both are here to serve Hashem. Now, let's say the Benoni that's an Eved, what does it say about him if everything is pretty easygoing? And we said that we come down here to struggle. We come down here to work. So you can say that person, but what would that Benoni that has it pretty easy, that is an Eved, what would be like a comfort level that he checks in that can be, sorry, I'm not making myself clear. I'm trying to ask this question, like what, if somebody, okay, sorry, let me go back a second. If this Benoni who has it pretty easy and he's on cruise control, what would motivate him to go off cruise control? Like, isn't that a good thing? Isn't that something we strive for? Is it the kid who has it pretty easy
Or
going
maybe
at school?
You think he has it pretty easy.
So
but
let's
he
say,
really
right,
doesn't.
let's say he does.
Or they could have
Let's say he
easy when
does.
they're up to a certain age.
And then they don't,
they
right? You know those
don't.
people who are like skinny their whole life, all of a sudden they have a baby and they're like, oh my gosh, like now I have to go to the,
So
what does that mean?
having to tap into their emotions would be something that would take them off their autopilot.
Yes, having to tap into emotion, making yourself a drop uncomfortable for a little bit so that you can go deeper. Because it's like if you're coasting, you need for like 1 second to tap into your emotions and not just think your intellect. So what happens is what we're saying is that if you practice this first tool that we were raving about last week, emotional talib, if you practice intellect over your emotion, what do you in essence turn into? If that was the only tool you practiced, what? An Eved. You become an Eved. You become an Eved. The more you practice intellect over emotion, you become an Eved. I am serving Hashem, everything. What's going to happen is that like you're going to explode. Like because you're going to burn out, right? What happens to like sometimes to like Yeshiva Bachram, right? Like what does it mean they burn out? Like in Eretz Yisrael, you see this all the time. Like they're in the army and they're being an Eved, they're being an Eved, they're being an Eved, and they're controlling their emotions, especially like let's say in the army. What happens after that?
They want to commit.
They like explode. They have to go to India. They have to go travel. They have to, because you're so, and think about it, it's almost like military style. If you control yourself, control Faigy, be in control. But we're saying 1 second. I'm telling you that this is a tool. But it can't be the only tool. If it's the only tool of controlling your emotions to use your intellect first and not your emotions, you're going to burn out. You're going to fizzle out. You're going to say, I can't do this anymore, because you're going to become robotic, and then you're going to be like, what about that whole emotional drive that I have that we were talking about so much?
Living authentically for yourself.
You're not living authentically is so good. It's so good. Like if you ever like tap into like a real emotional Yiddishkeit and like you feel it,
That's what Becky was just now.
then you just like you breathe a little bit. It's like you're on a pressure cooker when you're intellect, but like you keep like running in circles. You're like, Faigy, control yourself. You're gonna blow up. That can't be the only thing, because Hashem doesn't want us to ignore our emotions. He put us into this world first with emotions. So it's like we're telling you it's a tool, but use it wisely, and it can't be the only thing that you can do. So what we're trying to lead up in chapter 15 is that there's two types of Einonim. There's one that has it easygoing, that's on autopilot, that gets hundreds in every single test, valedictorian, geo president, things come easily, best shidduch, first one, gets married, baby's not colicky, everything is easy, right? Like, everything is just like, and it's a very small percentage, but what you start to realize is even though that's something that we want to attain, we also want to remember that we have to be ovdin. We have to do an avodah. Like it is an avodah.
With autopilot, I have one autopilot kid, and she is geo president.
Name that like, you know,
But I
goody
taught
goody
her
kid.
from a young age how
Autopilot
to
kid.
say no and how to stand up for herself, because automatically she'll do anything for a friend, for a teacher, for anything. That's her nature. Just of being this all.
They
And
get
then
right.
They get lost. They're like, who am I? If I'm not giving to someone, who am I? So I had to teach her from a young age. If you want something, if you really want it, you're in a nice way. You can say no. I'm so sorry. I can't do
Tap
it.
into your
And it was so uncomfortable for her.
You
from
have
the
to
beginning.
practice, right?
It was so uncomfortable, but now she's learning how she learned how to do it, and she's confident in her decision.
Like it was probably uncomfortable for her to do it.
100%. It was
Like
so
get out of your comfort
uncomfortable.
zone, right?
It was so uncomfortable for her to say. Naturally she would say, no, you can have the solo. It's okay. You want the solo, you can have it. And I'd be like, but do you want it?
Right.
You got it first. Why are you giving it away?
Especially when if you yourself, like I know I'm not that type of person.
Autopilot
but
person?
Definitely not. So when I see like your own child like not who's on autopilot and they don't have emotion, I guess like now like I'm
Right.
saying, you like, what are you doing? Do you want the soda? Like what
Right.
do you need? Don't give me
By the way, you
soda.
start to recognize people. And it's a cool technique. Like we were saying that, like Tanya is like changing you in the best way, and like you start to see people, and you understand people more, and you understand yourself more, and you're like, okay, I'm having this moment where this is pretty easy for me. How can I make it a little bit more uncomfortable? Because I don't want to be in a state of easy. Because being on autopilot is great for a certain amount of time until I burst. I don't want to
I'm gonna
burst.
first wait till I get to autopilot.
Let's get to autopilot, and then we'll worry about bursting. Right, I know. But I also
nature. might
It's
not
a
ever
nature.
get
You might
through
not
autopilot.
ever.
Right.
You
And
might
that's
not
fine.
ever.
That's
Have you
fine.
ever like walked into a place where you're like, everybody here is on autopilot?
Yeah.
I'm like scared to like
Don't
put it
name
out there.
names.
I'm not going to name names or institutions,
Yeah.
but like you walked into places where you're like,
Either you're in or you're out.
I'm-
That's
am
how
I, like-
the systems.
Yeah.
that's the
System is
systems,
work, exactly.
right? So the system, the shidduch system
system,
works for
no. The
autopilot
school
people.
system
The
is made
school
for
system
autopilot kids.
works for autopilot kids, and this,
It is.
and then you're saying like we're already at 20%. So then what do we have to say about our school systems, right?
It's not
like,
serving 80% of the kids.
right? So it's like it's a very small percentage, but it makes it so much. Once you understand it, you're like, okay, you're an Eved, you're
Why
an
are you going
Ovid,
to
right?
schools and teach Tanya to all the schools?
So we're starting here.
That would be a dream.
That would be a dream, right? Okay, I always say like you just keep saying it because you
Only Chabad
more-
schools teach it.
right,
Yeah, but they teach differently.
right. So yeah.
Is autopilot like not connecting?
So it's definitely a way of
I was
connecting.
just gonna say, like, we're making, like, you know.
We're making it like it's
It's not.
like it's
Okay,
bad.
there is a
It's not
place,
tragic.
schools-
Think of autopilot?
There is a place for schools
Yes.
to, as I used to be in education, so like I will say that like autopilot, of course, like we have to adjust and help give the tools to those who aren't, to help them learn how to not be on autopilot and certain people. But there is
Right.
a place for
There is
everything.
definitely a
I
place
understand
for it,
the
yeah.
place and time.
It's not
Right.
a bad thing.
It's not a bad
At
thing.
all.
Anything like
Autopilot is
bad.
like the people who are like never like in compromised positions. Like they're always just like, I'm thinking more like an adult way. Like
yeah.
these things aren't hard for them. They don't struggle with sneeze or like
There you
It's just,
go.
like everything's just like
Yes.
easy.
They struggle.
But they're not when they're. But they like if they dive in, they dive in, but they're not like.
It has
they're
a
not
price. It
passionate.
has
They're
a
not-
price tag.
I feel like they're not
100%.
connected.
It's 100% comes with a price
It's
tag.
almost
It
like
comes
when you
with
fight with that person, it's like she's like, well, I'm sneezing this and then like that, and I'm like, okay, but there's like no passion. And then there's those people who are like super not sneeze, and then they're like, but I dive in and I'm so connected, I'm way firmer than you, and it's like it's that fight.
I think
And, like, I
that
don't know
that's
what's, like, I
because
don't
then
know.
you have to say that this is her personality, so obviously it's easy for her. But the question is, you're saying what we're learning here is that we want to serve Hashem with our passions. We want to serve Hashem with our emotions because remember we started off saying that there's the difference between emotion and behaviors is that emotions are much more in line to who you are. So if you want to be the most alive that you are, you want to tap into your emotions. The problem is that we have to be on guard all the time with our behavior. So 100% we want to serve Hashem most with our emotions. So we tell these autopilot people, and by the way, this is really what chapter 15 is about. We tell those autopilot people, you have to push yourself to the limits. You have to push yourself to a place where you're uncomfortable. And that is like ironic because you're like, what do you mean? We're taught our whole life that if you're in a good place, you stay there. Don't go in. Don't come out of it. Why would you leave the line if you're in the right line? Why should I step out of line? That's going to give me so much stress and anxiety. I'm finally in a good place.
You're taught that, but I think as adults, like at least like in the professional world or in fitness, you're always taught that if you want to make a change, you got to make yourself uncomfortable. You have to push a little harder, go a little deeper, open doors that open those klipas,
Right.
To get there to uncover it.
100%.
So like as children, we need because a lot of the time there's lacking of boundaries and understanding. And
So
as
it's
you
and by the way,
mature-
that's why as a kid we go to the school systems. We're put in institutions. We're kind of like put into boxes so that we learn. But then, right, as we
maybe
get
that's where we
older,
lost it in our educating.
We've
our
lost it
other
at some
people,
point, right.
Is that like at a certain point, when you're mature enough, you
can
then
push
need to
limits.
learn how to push your limits and discover yourself.
right, 100%. I think that's
So I
very
think there's a
important to
place for
hear.
both.
There's definitely a place for
I just feel
both.
like the school system doesn't even says like just stay in the box. Like you'll,
Right.
Don't be different.
you'll get
Right.
far.
You know that kid, like they ran their thing, like she needs to go to the office to make copies. Like she's the kid that has to go to the copies. She's
So the
not
thing
right.
Is that right now how the school system is it serves the 20% autopilot kids and also
It
does
trains the
kids-
80%.
No, so then there's
No?
20% that struggle, let's say with learning disabilities, whatever. If it's caught and if they are serviced, they're also space for them, and then you have 60 in between.
Right.
And that's where
Those are the
60
lost.
is lost.
Yes.
They're not connecting. That's the issue. So yeah, we have special ed systems, and we have all those other things, and then we have the
Kids that are
that
just
get hundreds
goody-goodies,
and 90s and whatever
Right.
it is.
It's
But then
the
that
middle.
60 in between is
Suffer.
that's who's
Yeah.
suffering, and that's those kids who later on in life are like, wait, what? Why am I doing this? What am I doing?
Right. It's like you start to see it, and like you see it in your childhood, and you see it in your friends, and you see it in people. But always know that bottom line, the deepest way of connecting to Hashem is through your emotions. Even though we're saying control those emotions, but don't let yourself explode. Exploding is the worst thing.
You need a process.
You need a process, right? No,
You can't
so
ignore it.
right. I know it's hard because we're taught like just ignore it with the first tool, but now we're saying a little bit more. So this kind of leads us into those. Somebody wrote a comment, so I feel like I should read it, even though I usually don't. But it's interesting. So in those communities, as soon as they get out of the institution, they enter institution of marriage and family. So whether they want it or not, they're going to be pushed out of their comfort zone. So like what? Thank you. Thank you. I'm like looking, and I know because I usually don't read the comments, but I'm thinking like it's so true. It's like you get you're even if you think it's goody, you're going to get pushed at a certain point to a place in your life where it's going to be a little bit harder. So now let's go from
So
like
you want to go just going back to you want to teach your kids resilience, whether they're autopilot, 60%, whatever it is. If you teach them resilience, they'll be able to, because eventually life throws you something,
right,
right? Eventually.
even the goodies,
Even the goodies.
even the goodies.
Life is gonna throw them something.
Right.
Someone gets sick. Someone I don't know loses money. Whatever it is, life throws you something. So you want to teach your kids resilience and teach ourselves also resilience. And the only way you teach that is by stretching a little bit and kindness also.
Right.
Kindness and love.
Right. Stretching is like the key word. Like you have to stretch yourself. You have to because otherwise,
but not in like an army type of way.
right.
Like not in like building muscles. Like it has to be from
Organically.
It has to be
a
organic.
positive
Right.
place.
Your emotions.
Right. So here, really, this leads us into 16 and 17, which is the next stages of the next tools, which are 16 and 17 are about meditate. Okay, so we said, let's say the first tool we had was Mokshat Aleid, which is your intellect over your emotions, and you can control any of your emotions with the right amount of intellect. And then we say that's great, but that can make the valve a little too tight. So what 16 and 17 says is I'm going to teach you how to meditate yourself into new emotions that you don't have. So basically, I want you to create new emotions that you've never had before, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. And what is that? And this is like kind of like where we'll leave this at, and we could go into it a little bit. We have 5 more minutes, but this idea where if I meditate on emotions that I want to feel, that will become part of me. So this is like the first time we're talking about this concept of meditation. So really, like in Chabad, there's a lot about, and Chabad Hasidus especially, in Tanya, there's a lot of focus on being able to create new emotions, but not only new emotions, also we'll see in 18 through 25 about being able to tap into emotions that you had that are laying dormant that you didn't know were there. So the goody could have tons of emotions, but he's just covered them in so many layers of self-control and impulse control that he doesn't even know that they're there.
How do you do that?
That's like the goody that all of a sudden like is out of Fabring and like hears music and is like, oh my God, like I like this. Like what is this? Like I never heard this before. Like I thought I need to be like sitting quietly meditating, but like now you're telling me that I can connect to Hashem through an emotion. What is this? So that's being able to tap into emotions that you don't have. What were you asking?
How do you do that? Like, how do you even know which emotions are dormant and like how to tap into
So
that?
before we get to the dormant ones, 16 and 17 says how to create new emotions. So let's say you're like, okay, I'm not that emotional. I practice very hard Mokshat Aleid. I practice very, very hard to control my behaviors because I just want to be the best Benoni. But I also want to be more in line and in tune with myself, like authentic, almost like authentic. I want to be more authentic of who I am. I'm going to meditate and create new emotions. And how do we do that? In 16, he explains that you need to meditate, and like whether it's with a candle or it's with not, or it's with just breathing, or just taking 2 minutes, or it's like hiding in the bathroom and say I'll be out in a minute, whatever it takes for you to do until you see like little fingers coming into the bottom of the door, whatever it is, do it and meditate on the fact that Hashem is in every single moment, in every single space that you see, and anything that pulses, anything that is of color, anything that's out there, you want to meditate and bring Hashem into everything. So we're saying that this is a person who very much controls their intellect, but all of a sudden is starting to get emotional about a tablecloth. because like this is such a great color and it picks up other things, and it must be that like Hashem, like Hashem is in this tablecloth. Like I'm giving you such a silly example, but you can think that in something even deeper. Like Hashem is in the forest, Hashem is in this tree, Hashem is in this butterfly, Hashem is in my kid. Like you gaze into the eyes. Like it doesn't have to be like meditation where it's quiet and you're whatever that thing is, like this. What's it called when they light those candles and they're like what? Yeah, like you don't have to do this like whole like ceremony. You could just stop for a second. And by the way, it is a form of Molshat al Alev. It is a form of using your intellect to draw out your emotions. There's one way of controlling it, stuffing it tight, closing it in a lid, putting it in the fridge, not opening it because those emotions are bad and I only want to connect to Hashem through my intellect because that will give me self-control. Or there's a way of Molshat al Alev. Let me think. Let me meditate. Let me realize that through my intellect, I can find an emotion. I can create an emotion. Through my intellect, I can create an emotion.
So you look at your kid, right? And they're behaving like whatever, okay? And you're overwhelmed. But if you look at them and you see the neshama in them, right? You might not feel it right away, but you say, okay, I'm going to look at that, I'm going to see the neshama. That's like making a decision to be in that mindset. And then you actually get to see it. You actually get to see it, and then you are able to control yourself in order to deal with them how they need you. Not your natural ability, like you don't go into defense mode. You kind of go into offense mode. Like, okay, I have a neshama in front of me. I don't want to hurt them. I want to raise them up, right? But you didn't have to start with emotion because that sounds like whatever. Like
that's like an emotion. It's like, what can I get for you, honey? How are you feel? How does this make you feel? Right? That would be like going
right.
An emotional way.
That might not be your personality. So you're like, that's not for me. But if you start with like, okay, I know my kid is neshama. It's more intellectual, more logical almost. Then if you kind of channel your thought process like that,
right,
then it takes you there.
Right.
It's like always going to be like who's going to be the driver in the front seat? Like, is it going to be my kid driving in the front seat, or is it going to be me? So I want to help my kid find their emotions, but I have to first help myself. So I think like what Mary was saying is like so important. It's like let your intellect drive the way that you want to create an emotion. So Molshat al Alev is one way is the pressure cooker, which is not sustainable. It's not. It's literally like control. It's like the beast is like inside of you, and it's like.
And if it feels like a pressure cooker, that means that you need to work through that. You know, whether it's working through it, thinking about it, talking with someone, whatever it is. Especially as a parent, like if you feel like your kid is always triggering you, then it's not just the kid, it's the parent that needs to work through stuff before they.
Speaking of goody kids and trigger kids, right? Or like, or trigger friends, like you can't be around that person. What is it? So I think that this is like a dual tool. It's like one way of saying I'm going to control it and tight, and one way I'm going to drive my intellect to create new emotions. And then 18 through 25 is like a whole nother technique of tapping into the emotions that you already have. So before, and like Tanya really reads like a recipe book. It tells you what you need first and what you don't. And it tells you that the first tool that you will need is Molshat al Alev. It's going to have to being able to control your emotions. Don't go too much to extreme because then you'll pop. But what you start to learn is that meditating is going to help. Meditating to find new emotions and find new ways to connect to Hashem. And by meditating means finding the godliness in everything. That's what it means. Stop for 1 second. It could be a 1 second thing. It could just be like, stop it, Faigy, like Hashem is in that kid. Or Hashem is in this food. Whatever, just stop yourself. And then the more you do that, the better you get it and the more control you have your emotions. And that's, by the way, a way of connecting to the passionate side of you or of your child or of your friend or of your parent. Connecting to that emotional part of them but you're going through your intellect. And then 18 to 25, we're going to learn about how to get into the ones that are already there and how you tap into those more. Okay. Any questions on this? Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll understand.
It sounds like the second tool is like for the autopilot people, like bringing out their emotion. Like what if we're the parent to the kid screaming?
Because the autopilot person doesn't really need to have
emotions right now, and you're like, how are you supposed to like like it's almost
Right.
like tap into the intellect.
But
not tap,
sometimes people are so disconnected, they don't feel emotion. They can't process their emotion. So they might think they don't have any emotion. They're just like whatever, just like going through life. Like think about like someone who's depressed, or think about someone who has
This
like.
tool sounds like it's for the person who's on autopilot.
Right, like,
It doesn't
Yes.
apply to
Okay,
someone
so
who's
let's
not.
say,
But, like,
okay, so
I
the
have too
first
much
one,
emotions.
right, okay, fine, so you have too much emotion. So
Right.
let's say the first one, let's say the goody-goody, the goody-goody is not strengthened by tightening, by pressure cooker, because he doesn't have that much pressure building,
Right.
right? Where
I think both can work.
both can work for both. Both can
So
work
as
for
the
both, but definitely
non-autopilot
the
person,
non-autopilot
for tool
person,
number 2.
probably it's the same tool, but it's two sides of the same coin. It's like one of them is only using your intellect to cap over your thing, always have perfect outsides, even if you're struggling inside, it's going to boil, but it's going to be good. And then the other way is saying, through my intellect, I can tap into that emotional part. So it's
There
like,
has to be some sort of balance. So depending on if someone's more emotional or if someone's a more logical person, they're gonna have more of one thing more than the other. But you can't have one or the other.
I also think that like different days we need to tap into it differently. Like some days you're like, I have such control. It's L. Of course I'm going to be at my best behavior, but I want to push myself. So I'm going to like connect in a different way this L. Because like normally L, everyone's on their best behavior. L is like everybody's on an autopilot because we're like, it's L. But then like, I don't want to just be an autopilot because L is L is the month where it's like the most, it should be the most emotional. Like we're going into Rosh Hashanah. So it's like, you want to think that like L, you close it tight, close the lid tight, but close the lid tight is what we're all used to. So I think on different days and different moments, you can tap into using the tool like a different way.
Like for me, talking to a kid who's like literally having a whatever, and I'm like, I almost feel like so emotional, let's say, that I feel like I need to put it on, like
Put the lid
pressure
on.
cooker.
Right.
But then I'm like, I'm exploding, and I'm like, okay, that's like, I have to figure that
But
out.
I think it's saying,
You know?
I think,
Yeah.
So then how do you like, what does that mean, tapping into the emotion? Like the emotions are very much present.
So maybe then you have to put a lid on it.
Right.
Then.
putting a lid on it though is going to bring out the right emotion. I think it's rechanneling. We're not like,
Right.
I think the whole purpose is to not stifle or to stop either.
It's like impulse
It's not
control.
to stop your knowledge or your emotions. It's just take a step back and meditate
Right.
on it.
Think
Not
about it.
literally
Think
like sit and
before you
meditate.
talk, or think before
Right.
you
Right.
act,
Just
or-
Yeah.
like instead of
Right.
reacting, instead of being reactive, be reactive. Whatever.
Proactive.
Either
Right.
one.
Proactive.
Right. There we go. Proactive.
Right.
Like
Right.
just stop and like recheck yourself.
Recheck yourself. Like just a
Ground
minute.
your-
Right.
Ground yourself.
Right. I think that we have to do both. And like
But
nobody
in the
is,
moment, it's very hard to ground yourself.
of course,
It's like
it's a
afterwards.
practice.
So
Right.
that's
You're like,
why I
take
think
a
I
beat.
just listened to. She's
Oh.
I
Makes
don't
sense.
remember, but someone
I
was
get
saying-
into this, like I get into
someone
like a
saying for the-
class and then I'm like, I only want to listen to that. And
The
then like,
like for parenting, that's why nowadays it's so important to A, work on healing, and B, work do at least like listen or involve yourself in 10 minutes of Pneumius Torah every day, because that's grounding. So you're being proactive. If you're putting yourself in the right mindset at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, whatever it is, listening to Sharon Pneumius for 10 minutes, you won't be as reactive because your neshama is calm, your body's calm, your emotions are calm. So
You're plugged in.
you're plugged in. If you have to be plugged in, otherwise you'll be reactive.
right. That's very good. Okay, I'm going to end this here.